My name is Annie Fox. I'm the Provincial Assistant for Justice and Ecology Organizing for Jesuits West, who is very, very blessed and honored to be the home province of the Kino Border Initiative. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank this session's sponsor, Boston College of Theology and Ministry. With the support of a diverse and vibrant community, the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry offers graduate programs that integrate rigorous academics with spirituality, service, and social justice. STM students are well prepared to apply their education in diverse contexts, emerging as just and thoughtful leaders throughout the world. And now I'm very excited to introduce tonight's speakers. Roberto Delgado is a father of three from Cuernavaca, ¿verdad? Cuernavaca, Morelos, Mexico, whom together with his wife made a living at their butcher shop. Due to threats from organized crime, he and his family fled Morelos in 2021 and traveled to the US-Mexico border, where they spent nearly a year waiting to access protection in the US. During his time in Nogales, Roberto helped form and lead a migrant organizing coalition called Los Revolucionarios, who organized vigils, marches, and press conferences to advocate for access to asylum. He now resides with his wife and children in St. Louis, Missouri. It is also my particular pleasure to introduce my friend and a woman who I admire very deeply, Sister Tracy Horan, who is a Sister of Providence and Associate Director of Education and Advocacy for the Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Sonora, and Arizona. Tracy and I actually used to work for the same network, the Faith in Action Network, but she has lived and worked as an organizer and education director in Nogales since 2019. Please help me in welcoming Tracy and Roberto.
Good evening, everyone. Great, some of you are awake, that's good. So I'm Sister Tracy, and I'm just really blessed to minister with the Kino Border Initiative. We work to advance migration with dignity, and we do that through humanitarian assistance at our migrant center in Nogales, Mexico, and also through education and advocacy, so we can advance humane, just migration. And it's great to have a lot of you here who have been part of that work, who have come down to visit us and support us. And in a few minutes, I want to share a little bit about the reality that our siblings are living at the US-Mexico border in Nogales. But I actually want to start by sharing a little bit about my own story and how I got here. That's me. So I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. Do we have any Hoosiers in the audience? Yes! Oh, that's so exciting. Welcome. So I grew up in a Catholic family, a very loving family. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. I was generally surrounded by a lot of people who look like me and talk like me. And I remember in high school, some of my friends would use the term Mexican as an insult. I remember hearing some dehumanizing messages, some really negative things growing up. You know, that reality of migrating from a different country was pretty far outside of my experience and the experience of my peers. So one reason it gives me lots of joy to see all of you young people here tonight is when I see you, I see myself when I was younger. I see myself as a motivated, opinionated, outspoken, hardworking student. I wanted to learn and achieve, but my perspective was a little limited by my experiences. Are any of you seniors in high school? Ooh, great. So when I was a senior in high school, so if you look at the picture on the left, I had a great Spanish teacher. This was many years ago. Her name was Senorita Trick. And she would ask us to debate so we could practice the language. Any of you taking Spanish? Great, wonderful. Stick with it, because learning a second language is one of the best decisions I ever made. So my teacher, Senorita Trick, she would ask us to debate to practice the language. And at that time, years ago, we were debating about whether or not to build a wall at the US-Mexico border. This is still a debate we're having today, right? So after the introduction you heard, you might guess that I was adamantly against the wall. Well, that's not the case. When I was your age, I responded to Senorita Trick, and I raised my hand, and I said, I don't understand. Why are we even debating this? It seems pretty clear to me. If people are breaking the law to come into our country, then that's wrong. So we should definitely have a wall. Some of you have probably heard arguments like that, right? Anybody? Yeah. So you know what Senorita Trick did? She was a really smart teacher. So she looked at me and she said, Tracy, I can see that you understand that side of the debate. What I want you to do is to debate the other side. I want you to research and argue against building the wall. Well, I was angry because I knew that I was right, and I didn't want to have to argue about something that I didn't believe in. But I was also a straight A student, and I wanted to get the grade, and so I begrudgingly did the research. And what I remember about that project is that I didn't get an A, but it was really important to me, because as I researched, I was reading people's stories. I was learning about why people made the difficult, sometimes heartbreaking decision to leave everything they know behind and migrate. I realized that I didn't know the whole story. In fact, there was a huge piece of the story that was missing for me. And reading those stories started to break me open just a little bit. So this is one of the experiences that motivates me to do what I do. Someone in my life invited me to see a bigger picture, to shift my perspective. And so I have the privilege of walking alongside lots of people from different places to invite them to see another perspective, to build relationship with people whose experiences might seem very different from theirs, but who actually have a lot in common with them. Now for me, I would like to say to you that that class with Senorita Trick was when I did a 180 and totally shifted. But that's not true. For me, it's been a journey over the years, as I've had generous people share their stories with me, their wisdom, their migration journeys, and show me that other side of the story. And I myself have migrated to the Southwest to be a tiny part of that story. So for the last few years, I've lived just a block away from the US-Mexico border. And so I see how it divides families and communities that would otherwise be together. If I go to downtown Nogales, Mexico on the weekend, or on the other side in Arizona, I can see people gathering, people celebrating a birthday, or trying to just talk to each other, but they have this steel barrier between them that's dividing them. And I think we have all had some experience in our lives, and we know what it feels like to be left out, excluded, or unwelcome, whether it's in the school cafeteria, not making the team, not making the cut for the musical, feeling like we just don't fit in. Or maybe someone responds to us differently because of our looks, our gender, our skin color, or our accent. I know for me, I was sometimes teased when I was growing up for being too smart, for working too hard in school, especially as a girl, for being a goody two-shoes. And I remember what that exclusion felt like. And so sometimes for me, the desire to be part of this welcome comes from that. I don't want anyone else to have to feel that exclusion. So I'm curious. I want to ask you, any of you who have moved from one state to another during your life, I'd like you to stand up. If you have moved from one state to a different state. Okay. Now, stay standing. I'd like you to stand if you have moved from one city to another city during your lifetime. Great, thank you. Stay standing. I'd like you to stand if you have moved from one neighborhood to a different neighborhood during your lifetime. Okay, now I want you to look around. Most of us are standing. So I think often we think that we don't have something in common with people who have had to make this decision to migrate to a different country. It's not the same. But all of you who are standing, you know the anxiety of being in a new place, how vulnerable that feels, even if you moved for a positive reason, like going to college, or maybe one of your parents got a promotion. But our roots are important, and it's hard to leave those behind, even if it's just talking about our neighbors that we know. So for most of us, the story of migration is part of our story too, in one way or another. You can sit down. Now, for those of you for whom this story of migrating from one country to another, might feel foreign to you, in honor of Señorita Trick, I want to invite you to hear these stories and to put yourself in the people's shoes that are sharing. Or some of you who know what it's like to migrate, maybe you yourself have migrated from a different country, or someone in your family, maybe someone you love has migrated. Maybe you consider yourself an advocate. So for you all, I want you to go forth and imagine how you can be Señorita Trick for someone else. How can you nudge someone, invite someone to get to know another side of this story? So many of you have heard that people are arriving daily at our southern border to seek protection through a process that we call asylum. And when asylum protections were created back in the 1950s, they were rooted in this agreement among a group of countries. After the Holocaust, they said, never again will we send people back to danger and persecution like we did at that time. Never again. So asylum protections are based on that commitment. However, over the last 5 years, that commitment has been really deteriorating. And to show you a little bit about what that deterioration has looked like, I want to introduce you to Eleuteria. Eleuteria and her family arrived in Nogales, Sonora, in Mexico in November of 2019. And hers is one of the many stories that has broadened my perspective and helped me to better understand the reality of people who migrate today. Eleuteria's father-in-law had been murdered by an organized crime group in southern Mexico. That same organized crime group made it clear that anyone with the same last name as her would also be a target. So when that happened, she, her husband, and her 4 children packed up as quickly as they could and they headed north. If they had arrived, you can see on this timeline here, if they had arrived before April of 2018, Eleuteria and her family would have been able to approach the port of entry. Port of entry is the place where people are inspected by U.S. officials so they could lawfully enter the U.S. So they would have approached the port of entry, explained they were fleeing threats, and they would be right away channeled to an interview to evaluate that fear. Then, if their fear was found to be valid, they would get a background check, they would be fingerprinted, and they would go to be with their family members in the U.S. to continue their asylum process, so an immigration judge could evaluate their fear claim during a court hearing. So that's prior to April 2018. Unfortunately, in April of 2018, the Trump administration ordered officials across the border to limit the number of people who could enter the U.S. to seek asylum each day. And they did that by stationing officials that would stop people seeking protection and tell them instead they needed to put their name on a waiting list. So that's what Eleuteria did when she and her family arrived in November of 2019. Eleuteria waited about 5 months in Nogales for her family's chance to get a fair hearing. And Roberto will share with you all in a few minutes more about that reality of what it's like to wait in Nogales on the Mexico side. But her family waited, and on March 19th of 2020, they finally got a phone call that it was their turn to be processed to go to the port of entry. So they packed their bags and they anxiously prepared for the day that they had waited for 5 months. The next morning, on March 20th of 2020, Eleuteria received another phone call telling her there would be no more asylum processing because of Title 42. Could you raise your hand if you've heard of Title 42? Okay, many of you. So Title 42, as some of you know, is an emergency measure that the government used to deny entry to families seeking protection during the pandemic, or to send them back to Mexico if they crossed between ports of entry, or even to send them to other countries like Haiti. So even as US citizens like myself could continue to cross back and forth across the border daily during the entire pandemic without even a temperature check, people like Eleuteria and her family, who were seeking protection, were stuck indefinitely in Mexico. Her family waited under Title 42 14 more months until they were finally able to cross into the US under a humanitarian exception to Title 42 last May. So during the pandemic, when hundreds of thousands of migrants, including asylum seekers, were in the US serving as essential workers, healthcare providers, supporting the US during the pandemic, at the same time, hundreds of people like Eleuteria faced a closed door, even if they were stuck in the same country where they were fleeing violence or persecution. So this April, the Biden administration announced that they would end Title 42. We celebrated together with the migrants who were waiting. However, a lawsuit has kept this barrier to protection in place. And many of you might have heard that just last week, the Biden administration announced that they would actually expand Title 42 to Venezuelans, who are now being sent back to Mexico if they cross into the US seeking protection. And we've seen busloads of people, hundreds of people, sent to Nogales, Mexico, and then bused further south into Mexico. So even though a small number of families like Roberto, like Eleuteria, have been able to access protection in the US through exceptions to Title 42, the truth is that many families are still waiting and have been waiting, sometimes for 8 months, for 10 months, or longer to access some kind of safety. So they've left their own roots behind while they wait in limbo to see if they might have a chance to set new roots, at least for a while, in the US, where they might be safe from the violence or the persecution that they're fleeing. Now, I say that they're waiting, but these folks have not just been sitting, doing nothing. And Roberto is an example of that. They organized more than a dozen marches, vigils, press conferences, virtual briefings during their time. Roberto is one of the many migrant leaders who decided to channel their frustration about this injustice into organizing so that people would hear their stories and so they could fight collectively for a change. So now I want to pass the mic to Roberto, my colleague, who will share a little bit about what that process has been like for him and for his family. And as you listen to him, I would invite you to hold in your hearts and in your prayers the many dads and families who can't join us in person today to share their stories because they are still stranded in Mexico waiting for an end to Title 42. Roberto?
Hola, buenas noches a todos.
Good evening to all of you.
Mi nombre es Roberto Delgado, tengo 30 años, tengo a mi esposa y tengo 3 hijos. Uno tiene la edad, el mayor tiene la edad de 9 años, la niña sigue de 8 y tengo una pequeña de 3 años.
My name is Roberto Delgado. I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I have a wife and 3 children. The oldest is 9, and then I have a daughter who's 8, and the youngest who's 3.
Somos originarios del estado de Morelos, la ciudad de Cuernavaca, que es México. Nuestra vida en Morelos era muy bonita. Es un lugar verde, con montañas. Es un pueblito apartado de la ciudad.
We are originally from the state of Morelos in Mexico. Our life in Morelos was really nice. It's a beautiful green place with mountains. It's a small town far away from the city.
Vivía con un cuñado al lado mío. Tenía nuestra propia casa.
My brother-in-law lived next door. We had our own house.
Para divertirnos, pues íbamos al parque. Es muy tradicional de donde yo soy, los domingos después de misa, pasar a ver el fútbol. Es casi todo el día de fútbol y mientras nosotros, pues la gente grande miraba el fútbol, los niños jugaban en los juegos que estaban en el parque.
So, to enjoy ourselves in our town, we would go to the park a lot and we would watch soccer games. And it was really traditional on Sundays. Everybody would go out to the park after Mass, and the kids would play on one place, and the adults would be playing soccer or watching soccer.
De donde yo soy también se da mucho la agricultura, ya que de ahí pues se exporta todavía el tomate, el jitomate, el elote, la jícama. Es muy conocido porque se da mucho la caña, de donde sacan el azúcar, y como que somos muy conocidos como el apodo de los cañeros.
So it's also a place where there's a lot of farming, and we grow a lot of tomatoes, jitomate also, onions, corn, jicama, sugarcane. It's an area that's very well known by people who cut sugarcane.
Junto con mi esposa siempre nos ha gustado salir adelante. Decidimos poner un negocio que era de carnicería, frutas y verduras. En el pueblo no es muy grande, es pequeño, y todo el mundo se da cuenta de las cosas que pasan.
My wife and I like to do different things to try to make a living, and we decided to put business, to establish a business. It's a butcher shop, and we also sold fruit and vegetables. And the town isn't very big, and so everybody knows what's happening in different parts of town.
Todos comentaban que había llegado gente del crimen organizado.
And people started saying that people from organized crime were being seen around town.
Cuando de repente nos llegó un papel diciendo, si tu negocio quieres que esté abierto, comunícate con nosotros.
And one day we got a message, and they said, if you want to keep your business open, you better communicate with us.
Dejando un número de teléfono para comunicarnos con ellos.
They left a phone number, and we were supposed to call them.
Querían cobrarnos lo que se le llama en México el cobro de piso, el pago de piso.
They wanted to charge us what they call in Mexico the pago de piso. It's protection money.
El pago de piso es una cuota que ellos quieren obtener de todos los negocios para que supuestamente ellos, los negocios estén cuidados y sigan abiertos.
Yeah, so if you wanted to keep your business open in that area, you were supposed to pay organized crime this fee, and they would see to it that you could keep your business open, and supposedly they would protect it.
Pues apenas el negocio daba como para seguir alimentándolo, y pues de ahí agarrar un poco para ir comiendo. Al no hacer caso de eso, pues llegaron a mi negocio y me dieron el tal llamado levantón.
So to keep a business going, you barely have enough to cover your expenses and to put food on the table. And there came a time when I couldn't pay the protection money. And what happened is that they came and they kidnapped me.
Fui secuestrado por 3 días.
I was kidnapped and held for 3 days.
Una disculpa. Recordar todo esto me duele.
I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to remember all of this.
Sí. Gracias. Fui secuestrado por 3 días por el crimen organizado, sin saber nada de mi familia. Solamente le pedí a Dios.
So for 3 days, I was held captive by organized crime. My family had no idea where I was, and I was just praying to God.
Mi familia consiguió el dinero que el crimen organizado estaba pidiendo por soltarme. Sin pensarlo, pues se los dimos. Bueno, se los dieron ellos. Y sin pensarlo, cerramos el negocio y salimos de nuestro pueblo.
My family finally got enough money to pay off the people who had kidnapped me, and from one day to the next, we closed the business and we left town.
Tuvimos que emigrar a otro estado sin saber qué iba a pasar, sin saber qué hacer, sin conocer. Llegamos al estado de Sonora, para ser exactos, a Nogales, Sonora.
We had to migrate to another state. We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know where we were going to go. And we got to a state called Sonora. To be exact, we got to a place called Nogales.
En Sonora escuchamos preguntando a la gente de dónde podían ayudarnos, no sé, alguna renta o algo. Y conocimos a un taxista muy buena persona que nos dio el nombre de Iniciativa Kino.
When we got to Nogales, we started asking around where would be a good place, or if there was any place that we could stay, if there was a hotel of any kind, and we met a taxi driver who was really kind, and he told us about the Kino initiative.
Llegamos a Kino y ahí cuando llegamos nos dimos cuenta que había más personas mexicanas y de algunos otros países como Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, del sur de América.
We went to the Kino initiative place and we realized that there were many other people from Mexico there, also people from Central America, from El Salvador, from Honduras, from Guatemala.
Cuando empezamos a hablar con las personas de Iniciativa Kino, nos ayudaron en comida, luego ese momento nos dieron de comer, nos preguntaron si traíamos ropa, nos ayudaron con ropa y algunas cosas de higiene personal.
When we got there, the Kino initiative helped us with food. They asked us if we needed clothing, and they also brought us some personal articles that we needed.
En Nogales, Sonora, vivimos también inseguridad porque ya que mi esposa fue víctima de un asalto a mano armada y le quitaron su bolsa que llevaba ahí su dinero y un teléfono.
But Nogales is not a safe place either. My wife was a victim of an armed robbery. They took her purse, and it had her phone in it and her money.
Hubo una balacera también a 2 calles de donde estábamos rentando ya después, en una casa que no estaba apropiada para vivir y más con niños porque la casa era de lámina.
We got a small hut made out of corrugated steel that wasn't really adequate housing for a family, and it wasn't in a safe place either, and there was a shootout about 2 blocks from our house there.
La casa era de lámina y aparte la cantidad que teníamos que pagar por mes eran 2,200, que era como 3 veces más de lo que se paga en Morelos, de donde yo soy.
So it was a house, with corrugated tin for roof, and we were paying 2,200 pesos there, which was 3 times what we had been paying in Morelos, where we were from.
Estuvimos aproximadamente un año en Nogales esperando para ser procesados por migración.
And we were in Nogales for about 1 year, waiting to be processed by immigration.
En ese tiempo se realizó una junta en Kino para los migrantes que estaban y una compañera mía alzó la voz y dijo, hagamos una marcha.
So there we were, and one of my fellow migrants, they organized a board of migrants, and one of my friends said, let's do a march.
Fue ahí donde decidimos crear o formar el grupo de los revolucionarios Kino.
So we decided to call the group Los Revolucionarios of Kino, Kino Revolutionaries.
Donde era ser parte de los portavoces de miles de migrantes que estaban ahí. Era ser como un comité para estar informados sobre todo lo que estaban pasando en la frontera y poder informárselos a ellos, ayudándonos unos con los otros.
So we wanted to be spokespeople for other migrants at the border, and we also wanted to share information with each other, so if anything happened, we could get information around.
En ese grupo conocí a miles de personas maravillosas que sin ser nada de uno te ayudan sin esperar nada a cambio.
And working with that group, I met thousands of wonderful people who, without being, a family or anyone that you know, would just give from what they had.
El grupo Los Revolucionarios surgió porque casi la mayoría de nosotros somos mexicanos y por la historia de México de los revolucionarios pusimos los revolucionarios porque un revolucionario lucha por la libertad y derechos de las personas que buscan seguridad para ellos y su familia.
We decided to name the group Los Revolucionarios because most of us were Mexicans, and Mexico has a history of having gone through a revolution. And for us, revolution meant freedom, and it meant fighting for rights of people.
Kino nos prestaba lo que eran salones o cuartos para poder nosotros tener nuestras reuniones y poder organizar todo lo que íbamos a hacer antes de la marcha.
So Kino allowed us to use their spaces so that we could have meetings and organize everything we had to do before the march.
La marcha era para el día 25 de septiembre del 2021.
The march date was set for September 25th, 2021.
Y hay un video que les quiero mostrar más adelante sobre qué fue lo que trabajamos. Y antes de la marcha, 2 meses atrás, estuvimos trabajando casi toda la semana para poder organizar bien, para que todo nos saliera bien pacíficamente y ordenadamente.
There's a video I want to show you later so that you can see what the march looked like. But we worked really hard for about 2 months so that everything would come out the way we wanted it to.
Uno de los momentos más grandes que viví en ese momento fue cuando marchamos de una plaza que estaba como a 10 minutos, 15 minutos hacia la garita.
One of the most amazing things that we did was to have this march, and we marched towards a plaza that was towards an immigration checkpoint.
Bien recuerdo ese día también que estaba lloviendo y aunque estaba lloviendo decidimos realizar todo lo que teníamos por la marcha.
And I remember well that it was raining that day, and we decided, rain or shine, we were going to go. We were going to do this march.
Fueron alrededor más o menos como de 500 migrantes y unos 100 personas americanas que nos estaban apoyando, tanto algunos que salieron para ir marchando con nosotros y algunos que estaban del otro lado de la garita.
I think there were about 500 of us migrants in the march, and there were about 100 other people from the United States that were either accompanying us from the Mexican side or from the other side of the checkpoint.
Todos cantaban y gritaban porras, expresando lo que querían y querían ser escuchados.
Everyone was singing, they were shouting slogans, and they were saying what they wanted, and what they wanted was to be heard.
Aunque estaba lloviendo, nadie se dio por vencido. Queríamos terminar lo que habíamos empezado.
And even though it was raining, nobody gave up. We wanted to finish what we'd set out to do.
Ese día también recuerdo que organizamos que 25 familias completas se entregaran a la garita para ver si en ese momento, viendo tanta gente, los de la patrulla fronteriza los podían procesar.
One of our actions that day is that we had prepared 25 families who were hoping to present themselves at the checkpoint that day. And we were hoping that the Border Patrol, seeing so many people who were supporting these families, would actually give them their interview and allow them in that day.
Y aunque fueron las 25 familias, fueron acompañadas del obispo de Tucson y con líderes de fe que les acompañaron con cámaras, desafortunadamente cerraron la garita y se metieron para adentro.
The 25 families were accompanied that day by the Bishop of Tucson, many faith leaders, members of the press. Unfortunately, they closed the doors of the checkpoint against us.
Desafortunadamente no logramos lo que queríamos, pero sí que supieran que estábamos ahí nosotros.
So we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve, but they knew we were there.
Quiero compartirles un video del evento de la marcha.
I want to share with you the video from the day of the march.
Como ustedes vieron en el video, desafortunadamente no logramos lo que queríamos, que era quitar el título 42 en ese momento y que las familias fueran procesadas.
As you can see from the video, we weren't able to achieve what we wanted to in terms of getting the 42 people from all those families processed through immigration that day.
No se logró la marcha, logramos ser escuchados y vistos por millones de personas a través de las pantallas de miles de cámaras.
But we did do the march, and we were seen by millions of people on screens and through the cameras and the pictures that people sent each other.
Logramos unirnos a pesar de la situación muy difícil y animar a mucha gente de los dos lados a unirse a nuestra lucha.
We were able to work together in spite of the difficult position that we were in and to encourage a lot of people on both sides to join our struggle.
Después hicimos actividades en Kino para que otras personas se integraran, porque bien recuerdo que cuando se empezó a hacer el grupo revolucionarios éramos como 7 personas.
We also started activities on the Mexican side of the border with Kino to get other people to join the Revolucionarios group. When we started, there was only about 7 of us.
Tuvimos capacitaciones con una compañera de iniciativa Kino, muy buena amiga, por cierto.
We had some trainings with a very good friend from the Kino initiative
Para poder expresarnos frente a una cámara, frente a las noticias.
and we learned to talk in front of cameras, to talk for the nightly news.
Por fin, en abril de este año, logramos que la administración Biden anunciara que iban a quitar el título 42.
And finally, in April of this year, the Biden administration announced that they were going to do away with Title 42.
Tristemente, una demanda en contra de esa acción. No se ha podido quitar el título 42.
Unfortunately, there was a suit filed immediately against that, and so far, Title 42 is still there.
Sin embargo, logramos que abrieran un proceso de excepciones por la cual pude cruzar a Estados Unidos con mi familia.
But we did achieve a process of exceptions to Title 42, and through that exception process, I was able to come to the United States with my family.
Muchas personas me preguntaron que cómo había mantenido la esperanza durante casi un año, la espera en México.
A lot of people ask me, how did I keep my hope alive during more than a year of waiting in Mexico?
Que de dónde había sacado esas ganas y fuerzas para liderar a la gente migrante.
And I always say that my leadership and my desire to struggle always came from the migrant sisters and brothers themselves.
Yo nunca había hecho esto, nunca había hecho lo que estoy haciendo ahorita,
I'd never done what I'm doing now before,
pero las situaciones te hacen sacar la fuerza para poder hacer lo que uno quiera lograr en el futuro.
but the situation itself makes you find that strength within yourself to do what you need to do for your future.
Y creo que viene de mis raíces. Cuando era más chico, en la misa de los domingos me gustaba participar, ya sea de monaguillo o barriendo la iglesia. Me gustaba siempre participar.
I also think it comes from my roots. When I was a kid, I participated a lot in church. I was an acolyte sometimes. Sometimes I just swept the floors.
Y si yo no puedo ayudar a una persona, a veces económicamente, me gusta ayudarla moralmente o ayudarla estando ahí para ella.
And if I can't help someone economically, say, I like to at least be able to help them morally or to be there next to them, encouraging them.
Creo que la actitud también viene de mi mamá, porque nunca se quejaba de la vida.
I think that attitude also came from my mother because she never complained about life.
Cuando mi papá primero se vino a Estados Unidos en el año 2001, de ahí ella nos sacó adelante. por unos 6 años, sola, nada más nosotros.
In 2001, when my father came here to the United States, my mother was alone with all of us for 6 years. It was just her.
Cuando mi mamá miró que no alcanzaba para sacarnos adelante porque somos 5 hermanos, decidió venirse con mi papá para supuestamente tener una vida mejor, pero pues, yo creo que estando juntos y con salud es mejor.
And my mother finally took the decision to go ahead and go to the United States to be with my father. And she thought that that would help us to have a better life. There were 5 of us kids. But I think as long as you're together, that's the most important thing.
Y me imagino que ustedes están aquí también participando por personas en su vida que les han inspirado a ser mejores personas.
I imagine that all of you are here too, doing what you're doing because you've been inspired by other important people in your lives.
Para terminar, quisiera que les quede claro un punto clave.
To close, I just want to be really clear and leave you with a message as clearly as I can.
Nadie quiere dejar el lugar donde es feliz,
No one wants to leave their home behind where they were happy,
donde sus papás y los papás de uno, los abuelos, fueron felices, crecieron felices,
where their parents and grandparents grew up happy,
donde uno quiere que sus hijos crezcan siendo felices.
where you dreamed that your children might grow up happy.
Desafortunadamente, salimos de nuestro lugar buscando seguridad para mí y mi familia.
Unfortunately, we had to leave our home just for safety, my safety and that of my family.
Y ahorita, y creo que por toda mi vida, voy a dar gracias a Iniciativa Kino.
And now, and I think for the rest of my life, I'm always going to be grateful to the Kino initiative
Por todo lo que hicieron por mí, por mi familia, y por todo lo que están haciendo, por todos los migrantes que están allá.
for everything it did for me and my family, and for everything it's doing now for the migrants who are still there.
Espero en un futuro ya no tener temor y poder estar con mi familia en paz, sin miedo ni tristeza.
I hope for a future when I'm no longer afraid and when I can be with my family without fear and in peace.
Y que toda la gente que busca paz y armonía pronto llegue su momento, al igual que mi familia nos llegó. Si yo puedo ayudar, como muchas personas lo hacen, yo lo haré.
And my hope is for everyone who looks for peace and harmony to be able to achieve those things. And if my family can help in the way that other families have helped me, I will certainly do that.
Y por último, veo que la mayoría son de 17 años, 20 años, 22. Solo quiero decirles que si en ustedes está poder ayudar a gente como yo, a gente hispana, de verdad que háganlo, por favor.
And I think that many of you are between maybe the ages of 17, 20, 22, and I just want to tell you that there's a lot that you can do. If someone like me can organize and do things, you can too.
Sería todo y gracias por escucharme.
That's it, and thanks for listening to me.
Ya no me hagan llorar, por favor. Que ya no me hagan llorar.
You're going to make me cry more, he says.
Well, I know we're at time. I think we're happy to stay and answer a couple of questions, but I just want to point out on the screen, hopefully some of you, after hearing what we've shared, are interested in doing something and being part of this work. So the first thing you can do is pray and name people who are seeking asylum, name people who are migrating at school, in the groups that you're involved in, we have some great testimonies, folks like Roberto, who have generously shared about their experiences that you can share. So check that out at our website. Please share. You can always give, so you can go to kinoborderinitiative.org. In-kind donations are also welcome. We have some great schools here who have done jeans drives and shoes drives. And then those of you who are meeting with members of Congress on Monday, they need to hear from you that this matters. A lot of times they see issues that are happening at the US-Mexico border as something that's far away, that no one in their district cares about. But in these next months, they're making decisions about how to spend our federal resources, so our tax dollars. And we want them to know we want those monies spent on infrastructure to welcome people, not on more agents, not on more wall, not on more detention and things like that. And so it means a lot for them to hear that message from you all. So I don't know, are we able to? Is this the one that's working? I don't know if anyone has a couple of questions that you'd like to, yes, I don't know how we do this. I think you could come to the front maybe, just like walk them fast. We have a mic. How do I get down from here? I don't actually know. Okay, thank you.
Solo quería decirte, yo soy inmigrante, mis papás son inmigrantes, y tu historia es muchas historias como la mía, y solo quería decirte que estás aquí en América hablando a un montón de estudiantes de América, so debes sentirte muy orgulloso y tus hijos también. Solo quería decirte eso.
Would you like to say that in English?
Sorry, do I just give this to you?
Repeat it in English if you want.
Oh, I can translate. I was just telling him I'm an immigrant. My parents are immigrants, and having immigrants speak in America into a bunch of students that are from here, it's a huge deal, like more than people realize. And I'm first generation as well, and that's more of a huge deal than anyone can see. And he's such a great role model for his kids and creating such a greater path for his children. It's really dangerous over there, and my dad was in the army since he was 8, so like these are real stories. These are things that people are escaping from, and we should take a greater look of how grateful and good we have it here. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Hola, me llamo Leandro González y soy estudiante de la Universidad de San Francisco y tiene la misma historia que mi mamá. Es inmigrante y es soltera. Teníamos 8 hermanos, pero sí, bien emocionar. Me dio lágrimas. Y
Es que es como... es lo que acaba de decir la muchacha. Son cosas reales, no son historias ni cuentos. Son reales.
sí.
Y gracias por... ¿Me entiendes?
Sí.
Sí.
Sí, mi mamá trabajó en el field toda la vida y mis abuelitos nunca fallaron un día del trabajo y murieron. Murieron sin hablar en inglés. So I'm just telling them that I had the same story, single mother immigrant, and worked really hard. She made sacrifices, crossed the border, crossed mountains, rivers, hiding under diesel trucks, and just the power of the story and whatnot. It's just very emotional. I tell them that it reminds me a lot of my family. And
Roberto was saying that, just like the previous speaker, you understand that these are real stories, that they're not fairy tales.
And my mom worked in the fields in Salinas Valley. I'm from Salinas. And my grandparents were both organizers for Cesar Chavez. And they worked hard. They never missed a day of work. and they died not knowing a word of English, but these are the stories that happen on our everyday lives. So thank you. Gracias.
I'm a no Sabo kid, so my Spanish is not nearly as great. But I'm a daughter of an immigrant as well, but I relate more to the organized crime aspect of it. My uncle actually just died last year from it because he couldn't pay to help his family, and I was just wondering, what can we do on our side to actually deal with that aspect of Mexico? I understand that's part of our history and revolutions, but it has to end. So I was wondering what advocates can do over here to help that.
There's a little bit of an echo, but you're saying, what can we do on this side to help with
Against organized crime in Mexico.
Organized crime,
Yes.
okay.
Well, I don't have an easy answer to that question, but we have to think a little bit about the systems and how the things that we buy are connected. So for example, how many of you like avocados? So right now in Mexico, a lot of the organized crime groups are actually taking over avocado fields and kicking people out of the place where they've farmed for a long time. So what would it look like to have a boycott against avocados until the US would decide to take some real steps toward supporting Mexico in dealing with corruption? So to have that clear ask. I think the United States has a lot of power. We can always put pressure. We're the biggest trade partner with Mexico. So, if we were to really challenge them to deal and put in place some anti-corruption efforts and also put funding toward those efforts and support those efforts, that could make a big difference.
I think we're at time. Gracias. Thank you. Let's hear for our community folks. Gracias.